There is a moment in Berserk where survival itself feels like an act of rebellion. The world is hostile, indifferent, almost mocking in its cruelty. Suffering is not an exception, it is the rule. And yet, Guts keeps walking forward, dragging a sword too heavy for any normal human. He moves through a reality that seems determined to break him. This isn't heroic optimism. It's something darker, something closer to defiance. The kind of defiance that asks a dangerous question. If the world is meaningless and cruel, what justifies continuing to live? At first glance, Berserk is remembered for its brutality, its violence, its despair, its relentless darkness. But beneath the blood and monsters lies a philosophical backbone that feels unsettlingly precise. Berserk doesn't just depict suffering, it interrogates it. In many ways, Kentaro Miura's world mirrors the ideas of Friedrich Nietzsche more accurately than many academic texts ever could. This isn't just a fantasy tragedy. It's a meditation on nihilism, will, and what it means to create meaning in a world that offers none. Guts is not a chosen hero. He isn't guided by destiny in the comforting way most stories promise. From birth, he is abandoned into death, literally born from a corpse on a battlefield. His life is a sequence of trauma stacked upon trauma. War, betrayal, abuse, loss. And crucially, none of it comes with cosmic justification. There is no grand moral balance. No promise that endurance will be rewarded. This is where Berserk becomes uncomfortable. Because Guts doesn't suffer for a reason. He suffers because the world is cruel. When the eclipse happens, when Griffith sacrifices the band of the hawk, the universe reveals its true face. Fate, causality, and the so-called God hand do not care about justice. They care about inevitability. And yet, Guts refuses to submit. Even branded, hunted, and broken, he continues. Not because he believes things will improve, but because stopping would mean surrendering his will entirely. His struggle is not against monsters alone. It is against a reality that insists his pain is meaningless. But this idea, that the universe is indifferent, even hostile to human meaning, is not unique to Berserk. Long before Miura put pen to paper, a German philosopher was already dismantling the foundations of comforting morality. Friedrich Nietzsche argued that Western civilization was built on collapsing values. With the decline of religion and absolute truth, humanity was drifting toward nihilism, the belief that life has no inherent meaning or purpose. His most infamous declaration, "God is dead," wasn't a celebration. It was a diagnosis. Nietzsche feared that without inherited moral structures, humans would either collapse into despair or cling desperately to false systems of meaning. This is where his concept of the Übermensch comes into play. The Übermensch is not a tyrant or a godlike ruler. It is an individual who creates meaning through sheer force of will. Despite the absence of objective truth, suffering is not something to be avoided at all costs. It is something to be transformed. He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. This is not optimism. It's endurance forged through confrontation with reality. When you place this framework over Berserk, something unsettling clicks into place. Guts embodies Nietzsche's struggle against nihilism more clearly than almost any fictional character. He does not deny suffering. He does not spiritualize it. He meets it head-on. Teeth clenched, sword raised. Contrast this with Griffith. Griffith appears transcendent, beautiful, charismatic, destined. But his philosophy is the opposite of Guts. He seeks meaning through destiny, hierarchy, and transcendence. When faced with suffering that threatens his dream, he chooses to escape it by surrendering his humanity. The eclipse is not just betrayal, it is philosophical collapse. In Nietzschean terms, Griffith rejects the burden of self-created meaning. He chooses a higher power to justify his actions. Guts, meanwhile, rejects fate itself. He becomes a figure of active nihilism, someone who acknowledges the void but refuses to let it define him. Even the idea of causality in Berserk mirrors Nietzsche's critique of deterministic systems. The God hand claims inevitability, but Guts' very existence is an anomaly. He is the man who should not exist, the flaw in a deterministic universe. Berserk draws heavily from medieval Europe, a world defined by war, plague, religious absolutism, and death. This was a time before modern humanism, when suffering was seen as divine punishment or cosmic order. Individual lives were expendable in service of larger narratives: God, king, empire. Nietzsche was obsessed with this historical shift, from a world governed by unquestioned authority to one where individuals confronted existence alone. In that sense, Berserk is not just medieval fantasy. It is a philosophical echo. Humanity standing at the edge of meaninglessness. Guts is a man without institutional protection. No church saves him. No king redeems him. His survival depends entirely on his own will. That is why his struggle feels so raw. It mirrors a very real human fear. What happens when there is no higher system to justify our pain? Viewed through this lens, Berserk stops being a story about despair. It becomes something more unsettling and more hopeful. Not comforting, but brutally honest. Meaning is not found. It is forged. Guts does not win because he is righteous. He survives because he refuses to surrender his will, even when the universe itself seems aligned against him. This reframes the ending not as endless suffering, but as endless resistance. Even in a godless, hostile world, defiance itself can be a form of meaning. Berserk doesn't simplify Nietzsche, it dramatizes him. It shows the cost of confronting nihilism without illusions, and the terrifying strength required to keep moving forward anyway. Berserk asks a question few stories dare to linger on. If nothing guarantees that life matters, will you still choose to live as if it does? In Guts' silent march through darkness, we find no easy answers. Only the unsettling possibility that meaning is not something the world gives us, but something we carve out with our own hands.